Everyone warned Lucas Sterling that in the cutthroat world of New York finance, your partner is your greatest asset. But Lucas didn't want a power couple. He wanted peace. So, he married Sarah, a quiet, unassuming librarian with no connections, no fortune, and seemingly no spine. He called her his safe haven, but behind closed doors, he called her a mistake. He thought she was a nobody who would never survive his world. He was wrong. When the sharks circled and Lucas's empire began to crumble, he looked for a savior, never suspecting the woman, pouring his coffee, held the leash to the very monsters trying to destroy him. This is the story of how the nobody became the nightmare of the billionaire boys club. The rain in Manhattan didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Lucas Sterling stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse overlooking Central Park, the glass reflecting a man who seemingly had it all. At 34, he was the CEO of Sterling Holloway, a private equity firm that had just swallowed a mid-sized tech competitor for breakfast. He wore bespoke Italian suits, drank scotch older than his assistants, and possessed a jawline that could cut glass. But tonight, the reflection showed a man irritated by the one thing he couldn't merge, acquire, or liquidate: his wife. Sarah sat on the beige linen sofa, her legs tucked under her, reading a paperback with a cracked spine. She was wearing one of those oversized knit sweaters that Lucas detested. It made her look shapeless, domestic. It made her look exactly like what she was, a distinct lack of ambition. "Are you listening to me, Sarah?" Lucas asked, turning from the window. The ice in his glass clinked, a sharp sound in the cavernous, silent room. Sarah looked up, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Her eyes, a soft, nondescript hazel, blinked rapidly. "I'm sorry, Lucas. I was just finishing a chapter. You were talking about the gala on Friday?" "I was talking about the board meeting before the gala," Lucas corrected, his voice tight. "Victor Holloway is making a move. He's trying to trigger a vote of no confidence. If he gets the street, James' family on his side. I'm out. Done." "That sounds stressful," Sarah said softly, placing a bookmark in her novel. "Do you want me to order something for dinner? Thai, maybe?" Lucas stared at her, a mixture of disbelief and exhaustion washing over him. This was the disconnect. He was talking about a corporate coup that would dismantle his life's work, and she was thinking about pad thai. "I don't want Thai, Sarah. I want a wife who understands that my head is on a chopping block." He walked over to the wet bar to pour another drink. "I need you to not be you on Friday night." Sarah flinched. It was a microscopic movement, a slight tightening of her jaw, but Lucas missed it. He usually missed the details when it came to Sarah. He had met her 3 years ago in a coffee shop in Brooklyn. He had been hiding from the paparazzi after a scandalous breakup with a high-profile runway model. Sarah had been the barista who didn't recognize him, didn't care about his credit card limit, and didn't ask for a selfie. She was a breath of fresh air. She was safe. Lucas, tired of women who viewed him as a rung on a ladder, had romanced her quickly. He thought he wanted a nobody, someone who would make his home a sanctuary, completely detached from the toxicity of Wall Street. But 3 years in, the sanctuary felt like a cage of mediocrity. "I'll wear the blue dress you bought me," Sarah said, her voice steady again. "And I'll stay by the buffet. I won't talk to the investors. I know the drill, Lucas." "It's not just about staying quiet this time," Lucas snapped, regretting the harshness instantly but too stressed to retract it. "Victor is bringing his new wife, Catherine. She's the daughter of a senator. She's going to work that room like a surgeon. And I have you. You're a—" He stopped himself. "A librarian?" Sarah finished for him. She stood up, smoothing down her sweater. "I'm a librarian, Lucas. I organize stories. I don't manipulate them." "Maybe you should start," Lucas muttered. "Look, just try to look expensive. Please. Evelyn Street James is going to be there. She's the matriarch of the board. She's 80, sharp as a tack, and judges people by their shoes and their pedigree. If she thinks I've married down, she'll think I have poor judgment. And if she thinks I have poor judgment, she votes with Victor." Sarah walked over to him. She reached out, straightening his tie, even though he had already loosened it. Her touch was warm, but Lucas felt a cold distance growing between them. "I promise I won't embarrass you," she whispered. "You don't embarrass me, Sarah," Lucas lied, looking over her head at the city lights. "I just wish, for once, you could be an asset." He didn't see the way her eyes darkened, shifting from hazel to something harder, like flint. He didn't see the way her fingers lingered on the knot of his tie, almost like a noose. "Asset," she repeated, testing the word on her tongue. "Okay, Lucas, I'll be an asset." The next morning, the Sterling Holloway headquarters was buzzing with the kind of nervous energy that preceded a bloodbath. The glass-walled conference rooms were filled with frantic analysts, and the coffee machines were working overtime. Lucas marched into his office, his assistant, Jessica, trailing him with an iPad. "Victor has been in the building since 6 a.m., Jessica whispered, her face pale. "He's having a private breakfast with Daniel Ross." Lucas stopped dead. Daniel was his oldest friend on the board. Daniel? Why is he talking to Victor? "Rumor is," Jessica hesitated, "Victor has dirt on Daniel. Something about offshore accounts in the Caymans. If Victor turns Daniel, you lose the majority." Lucas slammed his briefcase onto his mahogany desk. "Get me Daniel on the phone, now." "I tried. He's not answering." Lucas raked a hand through his hair. The walls were closing in. He looked at the framed photo on his desk. It wasn't of Sarah. It was a photo of him shaking hands with the President of the United States. He had removed Sarah's photo 6 months ago when a client had asked if she was his housekeeper. He told himself it was to protect her privacy. "What about Evelyn Street James?" Lucas asked. "Has she RSVP'd for the gala?" "She has," Jessica confirmed. "But there's a note attached to her acceptance. Read it." Jessica scrolled down. "Mr. Sterling, I look forward to the evening. I understand you will be bringing your wife. I am eager to finally meet the woman who captured the heart of our iron CEO. Do ensure she is prepared for conversation. I have little patience for silence." Lucas groaned, sinking into his leather chair. Conversation. Evelyn Street James wanted to discuss art history, geopolitical economics, and the nuances of polo. Sarah's last conversation with him was about whether they should get a cat or a dog. "She's going to eat Sarah alive," Lucas murmured. "And then she's going to eat me." He spent the rest of the day in a haze of strategy meetings, trying to whip votes, but the tide was turning. Victor Holloway was charismatic, ruthless, and currently winning. Victor was selling the board a vision of aggressive expansion, while Lucas was preaching stability. In a market hungry for returns, stability sounded like stagnation. At 7 p.m., Lucas left the office, his headache pounding. He decided to stop by a jewelry store on 5th Avenue. He needed armor for Sarah. If she couldn't speak the language, she at least needed to look the part. He bought a diamond necklace that cost more than Sarah's childhood home. It was cold, heavy, and undeniably impressive. When he got home, the apartment was dark. "Sarah?" he called out. No answer. He walked into the kitchen. On the counter sat a single piece of paper. It wasn't a note. It was a flyer. The Street James Charity Auction, benefiting literacy in underserved communities. Lucas frowned. Why did Sarah have a flyer for a Street James event? He flipped it over. On the back, in Sarah's neat, looped handwriting, was a list of names. Asterisk, Victor Holloway. Leverage. The scandal in 2018. Asterisk, Daniel Ross. Leverage. Loyalty versus fear. Asterisk, Evelyn Street James. Leverage. The music box. Lucas stared at the paper. The handwriting was unmistakably Sarah's, but the content was alien. Leverage? What did Sarah know about Victor's 2018 scandal? Even the press had buried that. And what was the music box? The front door clicked open. Lucas spun around, hiding the paper behind his back. Sarah walked in. She looked different. She wasn't wearing the shapeless sweater. She was wearing a sharp, tailored black blazer and trousers. Her hair, usually in a messy bun, was blown out straight. She looked capable. "Where were you?" Lucas asked, his voice wavering slightly. "Library," Sarah said, kicking off her heels. Just doing some research. Research on what? She looked him dead in the eye, and for the first time, Lucas felt a shiver of unease. On assets, Lucas. You asked me to be an asset. She walked past him to the fridge, grabbing a bottle of sparkling water. I figured if I'm going to the slaughter on Friday, I should know who holds the knife. Lucas pulled the paper from behind his back. What is this? What is the music box? Sarah paused with the bottle halfway to her lips. She glanced at the paper, then back at him. A small, enigmatic smile played on her lips, a smile he had never seen before. Oh, that? She said airily. Just notes for my book club. We're reading a mystery novel. It has Victor's name on it. Sarah. It's a very realistic novel, she said, uncapping the water. Don't worry about it, honey. I'm going to go try on that blue dress. I want to make sure it fits perfectly for Evelyn. She walked down the hallway, leaving Lucas standing in the kitchen, the diamond necklace heavy in his pocket, and a strange, cold pit forming in his stomach. He realized then that he didn't know his wife at all. He had married a reflection of his own desire for peace, but reflections are just tricks of the light, and in the shadows, Sarah was sharpening something. The 48 hours leading up to the Street James Gala were a slow-motion car crash for Lucas Sterling. The atmosphere at Sterling Holloway had shifted from anxious to funereal. The analysts, usually loud and brash, whispered in corridors. The secretaries avoided eye contact. It was the smell of a regime change. Victor Holloway was strutting. That was the only word for it. He walked the halls of the firm like he had already commissioned the decorators to redo the executive suite. On Thursday afternoon, he barged into Lucas's office without knocking, dropping a thick leather binder onto the desk. Due diligence for the Monday vote, Victor said, his smile tight and predatory. He was a handsome man, in a conventional, polished way, blonde, blue-eyed, and emanating the kind of confidence that comes from never having heard the word no in 40 years. I thought you'd want to see the redundancy packages we've drafted for your loyalists. Lucas didn't look at the binder. You're counting your chickens, Victor. Evelyn hasn't cast her proxy yet. Victor laughed, a short, barking sound. Evelyn, please. She's a pragmatist. She sees the numbers. Since you married that little mouse of yours, you've gone soft, Lucas. You lost the killer instinct. The market senses it. Evelyn senses it. He leaned in, placing both hands on Lucas's desk. Bring her to the gala, please. Let everyone see the nobody you traded your ambition for. It'll make the vote on Monday a formality. Victor turned and walked out, leaving the door wide open. Lucas stared at the empty doorway, his blood boiling. The worst part was that Victor was right. He had gone soft. He had sought comfort over conquest, and now he was paying the price. He picked up his phone to call Sarah, to tell her to stay home, to tell her he'd go alone and claim she was sick. He couldn't bear the thought of Victor and his shark wife, Catherine, tearing Sarah apart for sport. But he didn't make the call. If Sarah didn't show, it looked like weakness. If she did show, it looked like incompetence. It was a lose-lose scenario. He left work late, his mind racing with defense strategies that felt increasingly futile. When he arrived at the penthouse, the lights were dimmed. Soft jazz played from the surround sound speakers, a stark contrast to the war drums beating in his head. Sarah was in the living room, standing before a full-length mirror. She was practicing. Hello, I'm Sarah Sterling. Yes, it's a pleasure. No, I haven't read the report, but Lucas tells me. She paused, frowning at her reflection. No, that sounds defensive. Lucas watched her from the shadows of the hallway. It was painful. It was like watching a child try to learn lines for a play she didn't understand. She looked so small, so ordinary. The music box note from the night before had been shoved to the back of his mind, dismissed as a coincidence or a misunderstanding. This woman, the one talking to herself in the mirror, wasn't a mastermind. She was a librarian, trying to survive in a tank of piranhas. Sarah, he said, stepping into the light. She jumped, spinning around. Lucas, I didn't hear you come in. I was just preparing. I see that. He walked over, pulling the velvet box from his pocket. I got you something for tomorrow. He handed her the jewelry box. Sarah opened it. The diamond necklace glittered violently under the recessed lighting. It was a cascading design of white gold and diamonds, aggressive and undeniably expensive. It was the kind of jewelry meant to blind people, so they didn't look too closely at the person wearing it. Sarah stared at it. Most women would have gasped. Sarah just stared, her expression unreadable. "It's beautiful, Lucas," she said quietly. "Thank you." "It's armor," he said, pouring himself a drink. "Wear it. Keep your chin up. And for God's sake, if Catherine Holloway asks you about your background, lie. Tell her you're studying art restoration or something. Anything but the library." Sarah closed the box with a soft snap. "You really think so little of what I do?" "It's not about what I think," Lucas exploded, the stress finally cracking his veneer. "It's about them. It's about the board. They want a power couple, Sarah. They want to see that I've merged with a dynasty, not someone who checks out books for a living." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Sarah looked down at the box in her hands. "I understand," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I won't let you down, Lucas." She turned and walked into the bedroom. Lucas felt a pang of guilt, sharp and twisting, but he washed it down with the scotch. He was fighting for his life. She would just have to deal with his temper for a few more days. Later that night, unable to sleep, Lucas got up to get a glass of water. He padded silently down the hallway. As he passed the guest room, which Sarah used as her office, he heard a low voice. The door was cracked open an inch. "Yes, the timeline is accelerated," Sarah was saying. Her voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't the soft, hesitant tone she used with him. It was cold, precise, and commanding. "No, I don't care about the collateral. Trigger the audit." "Yes, tonight." Lucas froze. "Trigger the audit? And regarding the Street James file," Sarah continued, "ensure the provenance of the Blue Heron is clear. I'm playing that card tomorrow. Yes. Goodbye." There was the sound of a phone being set down. Lucas stood there, his heart hammering against his ribs. Audit? Street James file? Blue Heron? This wasn't book club talk. This was the vernacular of high-stakes corporate warfare. He pushed the door open. Sarah was sitting at the desk, illuminated only by the glow of a laptop screen. She wasn't wearing her glasses. She looked up, and for a split second, Lucas saw a stranger. Her eyes were sharp, alert, and dangerous. Then, the mask slipped back into place. She blinked, grabbing her glasses from the desk and sliding them on. She hunched her shoulders, instantly becoming smaller. "Lucas?" she squeaked. "Is everything okay?" "Who were you talking to?" Lucas demanded, stepping into the room. "My sister," Sarah stammered. "She's having trouble with her taxes. I was just helping her." "You said, trigger the audit." "Yes, she's being audited by the IRS. It's very stressful." Lucas looked at her laptop. The screen was black. She had minimized everything the moment he entered. "And the Street James file?" he pressed. Sarah's face went blank. "I don't know what you mean." "I was talking about James, my sister's husband. It was a lie, a clumsy, terrible lie." But looking at her at the oversized pajama shirt, the messy hair, the nervous wringing of her hands, Lucas's brain short-circuited. The cognitive dissonance was too great. He couldn't reconcile the shark he had heard with the mouse he saw. "Go to sleep, Sarah," he said, backing out of the room. "We have a big day tomorrow." "Good night, Lucas," she whispered. As he walked back to bed, he didn't see Sarah open the laptop again. He didn't see the screen illuminate a complex web of financial data, with a photo of Victor Holloway in the center, crossed out in red digital ink. The Street James Foundation Gala was held at the Pierre Hotel, a bastion of old-world New York money. The ballroom was a sea of tuxedos, silk gowns, and the kind of heavy, floral perfume that smelled like compounded interest. The flashbulbs blinded them the moment the limousine door opened. Lucas stepped out first, buttoning his tuxedo jacket, projecting the image of a titan of industry. He turned and offered his hand to Sarah. She emerged. Lucas actually paused. He had seen the blue dress on the hanger, a simple, midnight blue, silk slip dress. But on her, it was different. It draped over her body like liquid water. It was modest, high-necked, and long-sleeved, but the way it moved was hypnotic. She had swept her hair back into a severe, elegant chignon, and around her neck, the diamond necklace didn't look like armor. It looked like a warning. She didn't look like a librarian. She looked like a statue made of ice. "Ready?" he asked, his voice tighter than he intended. "Ready," she said. She didn't squeeze his hand for comfort. Her grip was firm, stabilizing him. They walked the gauntlet of the red carpet. Reporters shouted questions about the merger, about the stock price, about the rumors of the board revolt. Lucas gave non-committal waves. Sarah walked with a serene, detached expression, looking slightly above the cameras, as if she were observing a chaotic zoo. Inside, the air was cooler, conditioned to preserve the ice sculptures and the heavy makeup of the socialites. The ballroom was already full. "Stick to me," Lucas murmured. "And remember—" "I know," Sarah cut him off softly. "Silence is golden." They hadn't made it 10 feet before the sharks arrived. Lucas and the lovely Sarah. Victor Halloway approached them, holding a flute of champagne. Hanging on his arm was Catherine. She was wearing a red dress that was cut low enough to be a scandal and tight enough to be a weapon. She was beautiful, sharp, and had eyes that scanned Sarah from head to toe, pricing her outfit within seconds. "Victor," Lucas nodded, his stomach tightening. "Catherine, you look vibrant." "It's vintage Valentino," Catherine said, her voice a smoky purr. She turned her gaze to Sarah. "And you, Sarah, is that off the rack? It's very brave. I admire that." It was a direct hit, a public execution, disguised as a compliment. Lucas opened his mouth to defend her, to say it was bespoke, but Sarah spoke first. "Thank you, Catherine," Sarah said, her voice level and pleasant. "It's actually a reissue of a 1930s design. I felt tonight called for something classic. Trends fade so quickly, don't they? Like certain market positions." Lucas nearly choked on his breath. Victor's eyes narrowed. Catherine's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Fascinating," Victor interjected, stepping between the women. "Lucas, I was just speaking with Daniel Ross. He seems unwell. Perhaps the pressure of making the right decision on Monday is getting to him." "Daniel is a man of integrity," Lucas said stiffly. "He'll do what's best for the firm." "I'm sure he will," Victor smirked. "Oh, look, there he is." Daniel Ross was standing near the bar, looking pale and sweaty. He was clutching a whiskey sour like a lifeline. He was the swing vote. If Victor had him, it was over. "Excuse me," Lucas said. "I need to say hello." "I'll come with you," Victor said. "I have something to discuss with Daniel as well." They moved toward the bar, as a group. Sarah walked beside Lucas, her steps silent, on the plush carpet. When they reached Daniel, the older man looked like he wanted to vanish. "Lucas," Daniel croaked. "Victor." "Daniel," Victor purred. "We were just talking about loyalty, and how complicated it can be when past indiscretions come to light." Daniel flinched. It was subtle, but obvious. Victor had him. Whatever dirt Victor had, it was fatal. "I need to go to the restroom," Daniel stammered, setting his drink down. "Daniel," Lucas pleaded. "Stay. Let's talk." "I can't," Daniel whispered. "Actually, Daniel," Sarah spoke up. Everyone turned to look at her. Lucas wanted to grab her arm, to pull her back, but there was something in her posture that stopped him. She wasn't shrinking. She was standing with her hands clasped loosely in front of her, the picture of poise. "I was hoping to ask you about your time in the Cayman Islands," Sarah said. Her voice was conversational, light. "Specifically, the intricate banking laws regarding double-blind trusts. I read a fascinating article about how they aren't as secure as people think, especially the ones set up in 2014. The air left the immediate vicinity. Daniel Ross stopped moving. His face went from pale to gray. Victor frowned. "What are you babbling about, Sarah?" Sarah didn't look at Victor. She kept her eyes on Daniel. "I believe the article mentioned that if the beneficiary is disclosed to a third party, say, a regulatory body, the immunity is voided. It's a terrible risk, unless, of course, the information is contained." She smiled at Daniel. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone holding the detonator. "It was nice seeing you, Daniel," she finished. "I'm sure you'll make the right choice on Monday. For the sake of privacy. Daniel Ross stared at her. He looked at Victor, then back at Sarah. He swallowed hard, straightened his spine, and picked up his drink again. Yes, Daniel said, his voice gaining a sudden, shaky strength. Yes, the right choice. Excuse me, Victor. I think I'll stay and chat with Lucas. Victor looked like he had been slapped. He stared at Sarah, confusion warring with anger. What did you just do? Just making conversation, Victor, Sarah said, blinking innocently. Librarians read a lot of boring things. Tax codes, international banking regulations. It sticks in the brain. Lucas was staring at his wife, as if she had just sprouted wings and breathed fire. She had just neutralized Victor's hold on Daniel. How? How did she know about the Caymans? How did she know the specific year? Before he could ask, a hush fell over the room. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Evelyn Street James had arrived. She was 82 years old, seated in a motorized wheelchair that cost more than a Tesla. She was draped in purple velvet and wore emeralds the size of quail eggs. She was the single largest shareholder of Sterling Holloway. She held the keys to the kingdom. Her assistant pushed her into the center of the room. Victor immediately abandoned his wife and Lucas, rushing over to pay homage. Evelyn, Victor oozed, bowing slightly. You look magnificent. Evelyn looked at him with watery, sharp blue eyes. Victor, you're blocking my light. Victor stepped back, his smile twitching. Lucas, Evelyn barked, get over here. And bring the wife. I want to see if she's as dull as your quarterly reports. Lucas felt a bead of sweat roll down his back. This was it, the final test. He took Sarah's elbow. Just nod and smile, he whispered desperately. Don't try to be clever like you were with Daniel. Evelyn is a different beast. Sarah didn't answer. She walked toward the wheelchair, her head held high. When they reached Evelyn, the matriarch looked Sarah up and down, her expression sour. So, Evelyn rasped, this is the one, the librarian. Good evening, Mrs. Street James, Sarah said. Do you know why I voted for Lucas 5 years ago? Evelyn asked, ignoring the pleasantry. Because he was ruthless. He reminded me of my late husband. Now he brings a librarian to the wolf den. Tell me, girl, what do you bring to the table besides a library card? Can you discuss the impact of the chaotic yield curves in the Asian markets? Can you tell me if I should sell my lithium holdings? The crowd leaned in. Victor was smirking. This was the humiliation he had promised. Lucas opened his mouth to interject, to save her. I believe, Sarah said, her voice projecting clearly across the silent circle, that discussing lithium is premature, Mrs. Street James. However, we should discuss the blue heron. Evelyn Street James froze. Her hand, covered in liver spots and diamonds, gripped the armrest of her chair. The smirk vanished from Victor's face, replaced by confusion. What did you say? Evelyn whispered. The blue heron, Sarah repeated, her voice dropping to a respectful, intimate volume that forced Evelyn to lean in. The music box you lost in Paris, in 1962, the one with the melody that plays La Vie en Rose, the one your late husband gave you before the unpleasantness with the estate. Evelyn's mouth opened slightly. The imperious mask crumbled, revealing a shocked, elderly woman. How? Evelyn breathed. No one knows about that. No one. I know where it is, Sarah said, and I know how to get it back to you. Before the auction on Tuesday, Evelyn stared at Sarah for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. It was a genuine smile, something no one in the room had seen in a decade. Lucas, Evelyn said, not looking away from Sarah. Yes, Evelyn? Lucas choked out. You're an idiot, she said, but you married a genius. Come here, my dear, she gestured to Sarah. Walk with me. I'm tired of these vultures. I want to hear about Paris. Sarah nodded. She stepped forward, taking the handles of the wheelchair from the assistant. She looked back at Lucas. She winked. As Sarah wheeled the most powerful woman in New York away from the stunned crowd, Victor Holloway turned to Lucas. He looked terrified. Who is she, Lucas? Victor hissed. Who the hell is she? Lucas took a sip of his champagne. His hand was shaking, but he felt a strange, wild exhilaration rising in his chest. I have no idea, Lucas said honestly, but I think she's winning. The limousine ride back to the Upper East Side was quieter than a tomb, but the air inside was thick enough to choke on. Lucas stared out the tinted window, watching the blur of city lights, yellow taxis, neon bodega signs, the wet asphalt. Beside him, Sarah was scrolling through her phone, the blue light illuminating a face that suddenly looked like a stranger's. She wasn't the woman who cried during Kodak commercials. She wasn't the woman who got anxious ordering pizza over the phone. She was someone else. When they entered the penthouse, the silence shattered. Lucas tossed his tuxedo jacket onto the floor, a rare act of disorder for a man obsessed with control. Start talking, Lucas said, loosening his tie with a violent jerk. And don't give me the book club nonsense. You played Evelyn Street James like a fiddle. You terrified Daniel Ross. Who are you, Sarah? Sarah walked over to the side table and poured herself a glass of water. She took a long sip, then turned to face him. She took off her glasses, folding them deliberately. I'm your wife, Lucas. Ideally, that would be enough. It's not enough, Lucas shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. My wife is a librarian. My wife doesn't know about offshore accounts in the Caymans or missing heirlooms from 1962. You humiliated Victor. You turned the board. You're a shark, Sarah, and I thought I married a dolphin. Sarah seethed. She sat down on the arm of the sofa, the silk dress pooling around her. I was never a dolphin, Lucas. You just wanted me to be one. You were so desperate for a normal life that you projected normalcy onto me. I just let you. So, what? You're a spy? No, not a spy. She looked at her hands. Before I was Sarah the librarian, I was Sarah Keene. Does the name ring a bell? Lucas frowned. Keene? No, it wouldn't. We were the help. My mother was the head housekeeper for the street, James Estate in the Hamptons, for 30 years. I didn't grow up reading books in a library, Lucas. I grew up in the servants' quarters of the most powerful families in America. Lucas stared at her, the pieces slowly clicking into a jagged picture. I saw everything, Sarah continued, her voice soft but steely. I saw the affairs, the bribes, the hidden safes, the whispered arguments in the library when they thought no one was listening. I learned that information is the only currency that matters. When I was 20, I started working as let's call it a research consultant for a crisis management firm. Rich people make messes. I found the leverage to clean them up. The blue heron, Lucas whispered. Evelyn's husband gave it to his mistress, Sarah said, matter-of-factly. Evelyn knew it was gone, but she didn't know where. I tracked it down years ago for a client, but never used the intel. I saved it, just in case. And the Cayman accounts? Daniel Ross leaves his password on a sticky note under his keyboard. He has since 2010. Some habits never die. Lucas sat down heavily on the coffee table, facing her. He felt dizzy. So, the last 3 years, was it real? Or was I just a job? Sarah's expression softened. She reached out, cupping his face. Her hands were warm, familiar. It was real, Lucas. That's the twist. I quit that life because I hated it. I hated the manipulation. I met you, and you didn't want anything from me. You didn't want dirt on arrival. You just wanted coffee. It was the first time I felt clean. I became a librarian because I wanted to protect stories, not exploit them. But tonight, you were in trouble, Sarah said, her eyes hardening. I can play the mouse, Lucas. I'm very good at it. But if someone tries to burn down my house, I will remind them why they should be afraid of the dark. Lucas looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the intelligence he had mistaken for shyness, the observation skills he had mistaken for passivity. He felt a surge of fear, but beneath it, a powerful current of awe. Victor won't stop, Lucas said. He was embarrassed tonight. He'll come at us harder on Monday. I know, Sarah said, standing up. He's going to try to discredit me. He'll dig into my past. He won't find Sarah Keene, the fix-it girl, because I buried her deep, but he will try to fabricate something. She walked over to the desk in the corner, the one she usually used for scrapbooking, and opened a drawer. She pulled out a sleek, black hard drive. "We have 36 hours until the vote," Sarah said. "Victor thinks this is a boardroom battle. It's not. It's a street fight. Are you ready to take the gloves off, Lucas?" Lucas looked at the hard drive, then at his wife. The nobody he had married was effectively the most dangerous person in his zip code. He stood up and unbuttoned his collar. "Put the coffee on," he said. "Walk me through it." Sunday passed in a blur of caffeine and data. The penthouse was transformed into a war room. Sarah connected her laptop to the main television screen, displaying a complex web of Victor Halloway's connections. "Victor is over-leveraged," Sarah explained, pointing to a series of shell companies. "He's been borrowing against his personal shares in Sterling Holloway to fund a failing real estate project in Dubai. If the stock price drops, he gets margin called. He's bankrupt. That's why he wants the merger," Lucas realized. "He needs the immediate payout to cover his losses." "Exactly. But we can't just leak this. If we leak it, the stock tanks, and everyone loses, including Evelyn. We need to perform a surgical strike." While Sarah strategized, across town, Victor Halloway was indeed desperate. He was sitting in the back of a smoky cigar bar in Midtown, meeting with a man named Gorski. Gorski was a private investigator who specialized in mudslinging. "I can't find anything on a Sarah Sterling," Gorski grunted, sliding a thin manila folder across the table. "She's a ghost. Birth certificate in Ohio, college degree from a state school, library card. Clean. Too clean." "No one is that clean," Victor snapped, his face flushed with bourbon and rage. "She knew about Ross. She knew about Street James. She's an operative. Find me something, Gorski, or make it up." "Make it up? She's a fraud," Victor hissed. "Plant a story. Tell the press she's a honey trap sent by our competitors. Tell them she's having an affair with the CFO. I don't care. Just give me something to destroy her credibility before the vote at 9 a.m. tomorrow. If the board thinks Lucas is compromised by a corporate spy, they'll oust him." Gorski nodded slowly. "It'll cost you double for a fabrication. Just do it." Victor sat back, smoke curling around his face. He would burn Lucas Sterling to the ground, even if he had to use scorched earth tactics to do it. Monday morning in the financial district was gray and rainy, matching the mood inside the Sterling Holloway boardroom. The long mahogany table was seated with 12 of the most powerful people in finance. Evelyn Street James sat at the head, her wheelchair positioned like a throne. She looked frail, but alert. Lucas sat at the opposite end. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, but he was calm. Beside him, the chair usually reserved for the CFO was empty. Victor Halloway strode in at 8:58 a.m. He looked victorious. He was carrying a stack of dossiers. "Good morning, everyone," Victor boomed. "Before we begin the vote on the merger and the leadership of this firm, I must bring a grave matter to your attention." The room fell silent. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Go on, Victor," Evelyn said. "We're listening." Victor tossed the dossiers onto the table. They slid down the polished wood, stopping in front of the board members. "We have a security breach," Victor announced, his voice grave. "Lucas's wife, Sarah. I had my suspicions after her unusual display at the gala. I had her investigated. It turns out Sarah is a pseudonym. She is actually linked to the chaotic downfall of the Grand Fenwick merger 3 years ago. She is a corporate saboteur." Gasps rippled through the room. Board members flipped through the dossiers Gorski had fabricated. They contained doctored photos, fake bank statements, and testimony from anonymous sources. "Lucas has been compromised," Victor continued, pointing a finger at his partner. "He is sleeping with the enemy. She is feeding our proprietary data to our rivals. We cannot trust his judgment. We must vote him out immediately to protect the firm." Lucas didn't move. He didn't look at the dossier. He just looked at his watch. "Are you done, Victor?" Lucas asked. "I am done when you are escorted out by security," Victor sneered. "Compelling story," Lucas said, standing up, "but I have a witness who might disagree." "Witness?" Victor laughed. "Who? Your wife? She's not even allowed in the building." The double doors at the back of the room opened. It wasn't Sarah. It was Catherine Halloway, Victor's wife. The room went dead silent. Catherine was wearing a modest gray suit, clutching a handbag tightly. She looked terrified, but determined. "Catherine?" Victor asked, his voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" Catherine walked past Victor and stood next to Lucas. She didn't look at her husband. She looked at Evelyn Street James. "Mrs. Street James," Catherine said, her voice shaking. "I need to report a breach of fiduciary duty." "Catherine, stop," Victor warned, stepping forward. "Go home. You're not well." "I'm perfectly well, Victor," Catherine snapped. She pulled a flash drive from her purse. "This drive contains evidence that Victor has been siphoning funds from the Sterling Holloway Pension Fund to cover his personal debts in Dubai. He's not merging the company to save it. He's merging it to hide the theft before the quarterly audit." Chaos erupted. 3 board members stood up. Evelyn's face went white. "That's a lie," Victor screamed. "She's lying. Lucas put her up to this." "And," Catherine continued, raising her voice, "he hired a private investigator yesterday to plant fake evidence against Sarah Sterling. I heard the phone call. I couldn't let him destroy innocent people anymore." Victor lunged toward Catherine, his face purple with rage. "You traitorous spy." "Sit down, Victor." The voice came from the doorway. This time, it was Sarah. She stood there, not in a librarian's cardigan, and not in a ball gown. She wore a sharp, navy power suit that matched Lucas's. She held a tablet in her hand. "Security is already on the way," Sarah said calmly, walking into the room. She plugged her tablet into the room's projector system. The screen behind Evelyn lit up. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a video. It was grainy footage from a security camera inside the cigar bar from the night before. It showed Victor handing the envelope to Gorski. The audio was clear. "Make it up. She's a fraud. Just give me something to destroy her." The video froze on Victor's snarling face. Sarah turned to the board. "My name is Sarah Sterling. Before that, I was Sarah Keene. I worked in crisis management. I know a cleanup job when I see one. And Victor Holloway is the mess." She looked at Victor, who was now leaning against the wall, looking like he was about to vomit. "You underestimated the nobody, Victor," Sarah said, her voice ice cold. "You thought because I was quiet, I was weak. You forgot that the quietest people are the ones who hear everything." Evelyn Street James cleared her throat. The sound cut through the tension like a knife. "I move for an immediate vote," Evelyn said, her voice trembling with rage, "to remove Victor Holloway from the board and to press criminal charges for embezzlement." "Seconded," Daniel Ross said, almost leaping from his chair. "All in favor?" Every hand in the room went up. Even Victor's allies abandoned him. 2 security guards entered the room. "Mr. Holloway," one said, "please come with us." Victor looked at Catherine. She refused to meet his eyes. He looked at Lucas. Lucas was stone-faced. Finally, he looked at Sarah. "You?" he spat. "You're a witch." "I'm a librarian," Sarah corrected, with a small, sharp smile. "And your story is overdue. It's time to pay the fine." As Victor was dragged out, shouting obscenities, the room exhaled. Evelyn turned her wheelchair to face Lucas and Sarah. "Well," Evelyn said, a glint of amusement returning to her eyes. That was certainly more entertaining than a yield curve analysis. She looked at Sarah. "My dear, I don't know who you really are, and quite frankly, I don't care. You saved this firm, and you got me my music box back. It will be delivered this afternoon," Sarah promised. Lucas put his arm around Sarah's waist. He felt the tension leaving her body. She leaned into him, just slightly. "Meeting adjourned," Lucas said. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind the last security guard, leaving Lucas and Sarah alone in the vast, windowless boardroom. The air still smelled of stale coffee and the ozone scent of sudden violence. Lucas leaned back against the mahogany table, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge. He felt like he had just stepped off a derailed roller coaster. Sarah, meanwhile, was calmly unplugging her tablet from the projector system. She wound the cord with precise, steady movements, as if she were simply tidying up the book returns cart at the library. "You should call Jessica," Sarah said, without looking up, her voice even. "The press release needs to go out. Leadership transition due to health reasons is the standard euphemism. Unless you want to go scorched earth and release the embezzlement details. Lucas stared at her, disoriented. Sarah. She finally looked up. Her face was guarded, her eyes still sharp from the battle. Yes? Who are you? Lucas asked. It wasn't an accusation, but a plea. I watched you destroy a man in under 3 minutes. You commanded this room like you owned the building. That isn't the woman who gets anxious ordering pizza. I can be both, Lucas, she said softly. People are rarely just one thing. That's the mistake Victor made. It's the mistake you made. I made a mistake? You married a nobody because you were tired of somebodies, Sarah said, walking closer, but stopping a few feet away. You wanted a blank slate. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a pillow. Someone soft to land on when the world got hard. I gave you that because I loved you. But don't pretend you ever asked for my strength. You only asked for my silence. The truth of it hit Lucas like a physical blow. He thought back to every dinner where he had vented, while she nodded sympathetically. He had never asked for her advice, assuming she wouldn't understand. I underestimated you, Lucas admitted, his voice hoarse. I treated you like furniture. Expensive, comfortable furniture. Sarah offered a sad, small smile. I know, and I let you, because being Sarah Keene, the fixer, was exhausting. I wanted to be Sarah Sterling. I wanted to believe that a quiet life was possible. Is it? Lucas asked, stepping toward her. Is it possible now? After this? The cat is out of the bag, Lucas. Evelyn knows. The board knows. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. She looked him dead in the eye. The question is, can you be married to an equal? Can you handle coming home to a woman who might have a better strategy than you? Lucas looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that the peace he had cherished was actually boredom. This tension, this respect, this slight fear, it was electric. He took her hand. It wasn't the delicate hand of a librarian anymore. It was the hand of a partner. I don't want a pillow, Lucas said firmly. I think I'm ready for the iron. Sarah squeezed his hand. Good, because we still have to deal with Catherine. Catherine? Lucas blinked. She helped us. She saved us, Sarah corrected, checking her watch. But Catherine is a survivor. She didn't turn on Victor out of charity. She saw the ship sinking and wanted a lifeboat. She's waiting for me at the cafe downstairs to negotiate her consulting fee for that testimony. Lucas laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. You have a meeting with the rogue wife? Should I come? No, Sarah said, picking up her bag. This is women's work. You handle the press. I'll handle the leverage. She kissed him on the cheek, a quick, efficient peck, and walked out. Lucas watched her go, a mixture of pride and terror swelling in his chest. He picked up his phone. Jessica, he said when his assistant answered, draft the release and send a gift to the library for my wife. Flowers, sir? No, Lucas said, smiling. Send a first edition of The Art of War and a bottle of whiskey. 3 months later, the landscape of New York finance had been permanently altered. The dust had settled, but the hierarchy had been completely rewritten. Victor Holloway was currently out on bail, his assets frozen, and his reputation incinerated. The nobody he had mocked had effectively erased him from the social register. Sterling Holloway was rebranding to simply the Sterling Group. The stock price had not only recovered, but surged to an all-time high. The market loved a winner, and they adored the rumor of a ruthless power behind the throne. The annual Winter Solstice Ball was the first major social event since the Red Monday board meeting. The venue was the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where the Temple of Dendur glowed under soft, golden lights. Lucas Sterling stood by the entrance, checking his watch. He looked different than he had months ago. The deep furrow of stress between his brows was gone, replaced by the calm assurance of a man who knew exactly who had his back. He wasn't waiting for a liability anymore. He was waiting for his partner. A sleek black sedan pulled up. The valet opened the door, and the chatter on the steps died down instantly. Sarah stepped out. She wasn't wearing the modest, invisible fashions of her past. Tonight, she wore a structured, emerald green gown with sharp, architectural shoulders and a plunging back. It was a dress that didn't ask for permission, it demanded attention. Her hair was loose, cascading in waves, and she wore no jewelry except her wedding ring. She didn't need diamonds to look expensive anymore. She wore her confidence like a crown. "You look dangerous," Lucas said, a smile playing on his lips as he offered his arm. "I feel dangerous," Sarah replied, her eyes bright. "I just got off the phone with Evelyn. She wants to know if I can come to the Hamptons next weekend. Apparently, she has a collection of vintage wines she wants me to audit. She just wants to gossip with you." Lucas laughed as they ascended the stairs. "Oh, absolutely. But she calls it consulting, so she can pay me." As they entered the great hall, the atmosphere shifted. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. The rumors about Sarah Sterling had become urban legends. "I heard she used to be CIA. I heard she was a cleaner for the mob. I heard she bankrupted a hedge fund just for sport." Sarah ignored them all, walking with a serene, terrifying grace. Near the Champagne Tower, they ran into Catherine Vance, formerly Holloway. She looked relieved and younger. She had secured a quiet, lucrative consulting contract with the firm in exchange for her testimony against her husband, a golden parachute engineered entirely by Sarah. "Sarah," Catherine nodded respectfully. "Lucas, thank you again for everything." "You made the right choice, Catherine," Sarah said smoothly. "I just made sure it paid off." As Catherine drifted away, Evelyn Street James was wheeled into view. The matriarch spotted them and waved her cane. "There they are, the king and queen of the jungle." "Good to see you, Evelyn," Lucas said. "And you, my dear," Evelyn winked at Sarah. "I have a little problem with a board member at my charity foundation. He's getting a bit greedy. I was hoping you might look into his financials." Sarah laughed softly. "I'm retired, Evelyn. I'm just a librarian." "Ha!" Evelyn banged her cane on the floor. "And I'm a ballerina. Expect the files tomorrow." As the orchestra swelled, Lucas pulled Sarah onto the dance floor. He held her close, feeling the strength in her frame that he had once mistaken for fragility. "You know," Lucas murmured in her ear, "everyone in this room is terrified of you." "Good." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "Fear keeps the sharks away." "I'm not afraid," Lucas said. Sarah pulled back slightly, a playful but sharp glint in her eyes. "You should be a little bit. If you ever forget our anniversary again, I know your passwords." Lucas laughed, a genuine sound of happiness. "I love you, Sarah. The real you. The scary, brilliant, complicated you." "I love you too," she whispered. "Now spin me. The photographers are watching." Lucas spun her. The emerald dress flared out, a vibrant splash of color against the ancient stone. Flashbulbs popped, capturing the moment perfectly. The caption in the next day's society pages wouldn't read Lucas Sterling and wife. It would read, "The Sterlings, New York's newest power dynasty." The nobody had not only survived the world of the somebodies, she had conquered it, rewriting the story on her own terms. And that is the incredible story of how Sarah Sterling went from being dismissed as a nobody to becoming the most feared woman in New York finance. It's a powerful reminder that you should never mistake silence for weakness or kindness for naivety. Lucas thought he was protecting Sarah, only to find out she was the one protecting him all along. In a world full of loud voices and empty suits, sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one quietly reading a book in the corner. I hope you enjoyed this story of betrayal, strategy, and justice. If you did, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. What did you think of Sarah's transformation? Would you have forgiven Lucas? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.